Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 6th, 2022 edition of Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of Racy Conversations and of the Collect Our Cousins weekly live stream series. I created this series to help white Americans like me become more effective in our conversations with white people in our lives. And I recently heard a great correction. We are not white Americans, we are European Americans. So I'm going to start using that. European Americans to become more effective in our conversations with other European Americans to help us build an embodied anti racist white culture. I'm featuring the people who inspire and teach me the most about this work, like Ashanti Branch.
Hello.
White Americans, the battle for our democracy will not be won in courtrooms or in the streets. It must be won in our living rooms, in our neighborhood meetings, at PTA meetings. As an anti racist, collecting my cousins often falls to the end of my to do list. But I want to urge you, if you're here with us today, to write a list of your friends and family you will collect this year. There are 21 million Americans, largely white, who believe that Donald Trump is the legitimate president and political violence may be necessary to restore him. And there's plenty of other European Americans who are neutral or who lean toward our side, and we just need to engage with them. And I'm so grateful with that in mind to have Ashanti Branch here with us today, someone who I we were chatting earlier. I realized we've never actually, I think, been in space together. I just
Mhm.
you in virtual space, and I'm like, oh my God, this man is amazing. I'm so grateful for your work.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and we're right across the bay from each other, so we're in close geographic area. So now
Yeah,
we're making it even closer with this face to face here.
yes, yes, and you sound great. I love your voice.
Thank you. Well, this is this is my studio. This is my little mini studio right here. So I get a chance to communicate. I mean, I do the best I can. You can thank the mic for adding some extra bass.
And tell me, so tell us about your work. I love what you're doing, and yeah, share with our viewers what you do.
Yeah, good morning, folks. I'm Ashanti Branch here from Oakland, California. I'm the founder of the Ever Forward Club, Ever Forward Siempre Adelante. We are a youth development mentoring organization. We do a lot of work with young people in schools around social emotional development. We do a lot of work with teachers and administrators and educators around healthy relationships. And I think all of us need support in building healthy relationships. Some people are really good at it. Some people need some work at it. But our work is really around expressing and understanding this emotional masks that we find ourselves wearing. So our global movement is called the Million Mask Movement. Our program started. I was a first year teacher back in 2004. Never planned to be a teacher, but teaching called me, and I found out as a teacher I was doing a horrible job. And the reason I described it as doing a horrible job is because I had smart kids in my class who were failing. Now
Mm.
I was at work every day. I was doing my job, but if I just blame if I just measure my success on whether I showed up every day and did my work, and I didn't measure whether my kids were learning, then I didn't feel like it was. I'd rather go back to make money in engineering because I definitely wasn't making no money in teaching. So
Say that again, Ashanti. I love that.
which part I would get so excited. Well, there's no money
Yes,
in
that
teaching.
that
Teaching. I
if you were showing up and
um
you had smart kids who were failing, it wasn't there was something wrong with the young people.
Yeah, I felt like there's a way I described it. I mean, in the beginning, it's easy to just be like, you didn't do your work, you failed. Hey, don't fail, right?
Mm.
That's one way of thinking. And there's many teachers who operate like that. Like, look, I'm here doing my job. Your job is to do your job. You don't do your job. Hey, this is what the grade is results. And I think there's some logic to that. That makes sense in a lot of ways. But I didn't come to teaching to just be like, let me just do teaching. Like I came to teaching because teaching called me to help transform education.
Mm,
And it was about transforming education for those students who didn't like school. Like there are plenty of kids in my class who love school, and they're going to do their work. They come to class, they do their work. They don't really talk too much to anybody. They do their stuff and they move on. Right? They got a plan. They either have people in their life who have gave them some skills, or they've already found a love for school. But what if you didn't love school? Like school is
mm,
not designed for people who don't love school. Like I've been both types of students. I've been a really not good student, a bad student, and I've been an amazing student. Now, when you're a bad student, you get a lot of attention. People talk to you all the time. They call you to the office. They write your name all over the place. Like you, man, you get a lot of attention when you're a bad kid. But when you start doing your work, no one really bothers you. No one says
mm,
anything to you. They don't ask you no questions. There's not. It's a very different experience when you are those two type of students. But guess what? Sometimes the kids who are getting a lot of attention are just looking for attention.
mm,
They may not want negative attention necessarily, but hey, attention is attention, right? And some
mhm,
people will. I think there's this quote that says, "The people who need the most love may be asking for it in the most unloving of ways." And
mm,
so, if you don't get any attention at home or community or in that way, then you show up at school, you know how to get attention. You just do something that they don't want you to be doing. They're going to give you some attention, right? And I think
mm,
that is what I started learning. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit back and wait. I think the thing with teaching, they're like, in 3 years, you'll get better at it. I'm like, I gotta be a failure at this for 3 years. There's no way. And so I was like, we gotta figure this out. Otherwise, I'm out. I'm out. Like I'm
mm,
gonna go back to the money because it was. I mean, I'm a math guy. I love math. I'm an engineer. I can analyze some things. It was not making sense to be that broke and to come home every day feeling like I'm not even doing a good job at this.
mm,
There's no logic. It was not a good logical choice, and I definitely wasn't going to be
mm,
waiting for this magical 3 years to get good at it, and then you all of a sudden feel. So I was like, let me try some stuff. So I tried all my little tricks and tips, and then the Ever Forward Club started that first year, and that's when they really found those group of young men who I invited to lunch that first day. I was like, look, I'm gonna bribe you. I'm gonna buy you lunch once a week. You
I'm
know,
gonna use my brokenness.
well, that was I was going to use a little of my engineering savings at the time. That's all I, and that started dwindling away real fast. But
Mm,
teenagers eat a lot of lunch, right? Especially, and they started growing,
always,
right?
yes.
But it was they knew, they felt, and they experienced this place of like we can be real here, and it
Mm,
takes a while. Sometimes some of them week one they were ready to open up, and some it took weeks and weeks, but when they began to find that community in that space, then the program began to grow. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't trying to start a nonprofit at that time. I was a teacher, broke financially, and feeling broken in my abilities.
mm,
And then when the club started, it began to grow. And that's when I realized, okay, it's working. So now how do we keep it growing? And so I was like, okay, we gotta start raising some money. We gotta, I can't keep my savings are about to be out, like it was literally a night and day kind of. You're like, okay, I have to do something bigger here. It can't
mm,
just be these lunches, and that's became this movement of the Ever Forward Club. And now, we're at 18 years now. 2004, we're at 18, about to be 19 years. Um,
mm.
it's been an
I
exciting
love
journey.
it.
Yeah,
I love this comment from Zoe. That serious self-awareness and reflection, Ashanti, that level of accountability is seriously lacking. Oh,
Thank you, Zoe. I mean, I think that thank you, Zoe, for that. I appreciate it, and I think at the time when I look back that many years ago, I think it's people say it's easier to put the dots together looking back. Like I think I was just really like disappointed. I was disappointed in how schools like I've been both types of students. By the time I got to high school, I was on track. But when I was a high school teacher, I was disappointed that there were no resources for students who didn't like school. I mean, if you're going to be in the associated student body, you're going to be a student leadership. These are for kids who either like school or know that the school is uh, a training ground for big opportunities in life. But if you don't want to be at school, school almost treats you like you don't supposed to be there anyway.
yep, 100%. And we know what happens, right? That what nationally, 79% of teachers are white, largely white women.
Yeah.
And then they come into the classroom. We come into the classroom with all kinds of racism, sexism, internalized misogyny, etc. And then that becomes over punishing of Black and brown young people, infantilization of white girls, adultification of Black girls, and this whole uh, over referring Black and brown young people for special education when they don't need it, under referring when they do. All of these different biases come to play, and then we know that if young people are pushed out of the classroom or leave of their own volition, they're much more likely to get arrested. And then that is
Mm.
the first step down the path of the school to prison pipeline. So we really, this is why I'm running for school board here in San Francisco,
Yeah.
is to make our high schools especially a place where every young person wants to be because they feel seen, heard, respected, valued, and connected
Yeah.
to what they want to become. I think, to me, the purpose of public high school is to help you discover yourself, what you're good at, what
Yeah.
you're curious about, what you would like to do, and then connect you to the skills, experiences, network that you need so that when you leave high school, you can go on, whether you're going to go to college, which is great, but it's not for everyone,
Yeah.
or you're going to start a family supporting a livable wage career. And there is no reason in the Bay Area, oh my God, that people move to from all over the country and all over the world. Why aren't OUSD, SFUSD graduates first in line for every opportunity in the Bay?
Well, I mean, imagine. I mean, thank you for that, and I think that there's lots of available jobs here, right? There's lots of jobs available. There's lots of whether you want to go into a tech space or you want to go into construction or you want to go into lots of opportunities. Now, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to when I finished. I wanted to leave Oakland, right? I went to San Luis Obispo, and I was studying engineering. I wanted to get out. Like I was like, I'm out of here. Like I worked real hard to like escape the madness, right? And I think that it's oftentimes if you there's one thing to leave physically, right? Like I moved down to San Luis Obispo, which looks very different than Oakland, right? Like 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 when I got to my dorm that first night, like there were sounds out the back window that I was like, what the heck is that? There were freaking cows on the freaking hills at the back of my dorm. Like I'm literally like, where am I? Like I'm in the freaking middle of nowhere, right? But I think that it shifts you, right? And I think, but if
Mhm,
you never left Oakland, like my friends who didn't never left Oakland, right? I think it becomes a challenge in that too. Like, how do I not only if I leave physically, do I get to leave emotionally? Do I get to
mhm,
leave socially? Do I get to leave intellectually? Well, sometimes it just happens. And I think it is important for it to happen in a lot of ways. But oftentimes, how disconnected do you get from those people who you grew up with, right?
mhm,
And I think that there's always people talking about, well, people say you changed, or there's always a scene in a movie where somebody goes off to college and comes back and the family's like, oh, you think you're better than us now? And I never felt like I was better than anybody ever. But I think it was this idea that my reality had shifted, like
mhm,
my temperament for like I come home and I hadn't heard in San Luis Obispo, there's no sirens. I hadn't
mhm,
heard no helicopters. And you come
mhm,
back home for Christmas or Thanksgiving break and you're like, what? You got to catch your breath a little bit. You're like, oh, okay.
mhm,
This is like I didn't even notice that I was hearing sirens all the time growing up because they were just a normal
mhm,
backdrop to the city. But when you go to a new place and then you come back, you're like, whoa, hmm, this is interesting. And your mind begins to shift in terms of what you have been normalizing so long, right? And I think that's the same thing for education. Like if you and your family, no one believes education is important, valuable, mean something, then you're going to do what people have normalized. And hopefully you get around some people who actually helps you shift your thinking, because that's what is so incredible, right? I've met students who didn't believe, they never saw nobody go to college, so they didn't think that college was a thing for them. They never saw anybody who had gone off and done something amazing, so they didn't think that they could be that. But that's what we tried to, like, I think the first time I got mad at my mom about college was this argument. I was watching Brady Bunch. I'll never forget the show, right? It was like the it's the Brady Bunch. So I they're telling Greg he has to go to college. Greg's like, I want to join a band. They're like, no, you can't join a band. You're going to go to college. And I remember after that show, like, my mom never told me I have to go to college. So I went in her room, marched in there after watching this show on afternoon TV. And I'm like, I got to talk to you. Like, why didn't you ever tell me I have to go to college? You
Mm.
know? And she was like, I don't know how she responded, but this is what she said. She said, are you going to go? I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, I guess I didn't have to tell you. I felt
Mm.
like set up somehow. I'm like, okay, this is some freaking mama mad. I don't know what some jujitsu taekwondo. I don't know what she did, this thing. But I ultimately
Mm.
thought, okay, that didn't work out how I planned it. I was ready for an argument. But I think that what it was somehow it was in me. And for some kids, that's not in them. So what are they going to do next? What is the next thing a part of your life? And I meet parents all the time whose sons are trying to figure it out. Like, and maybe they're in a stuck spot. Maybe they're in a curve and a turn there. And my work is just asking a lot of questions. And that's what we do in our mentoring work, is like, who are you? Where are you going? What do you want to do with this life that you got? What are you going to do while you're here? What's important to you? What are your values? What's in the way? What's blocking you? Like, what are you not saying that needs to be said? What are you saying that no one's hearing? I don't even know what questions are going to come up next. I just kind of follow their curiosity. But, some people don't even get people asking them about themselves.
100%.
Yeah. And so that's what we end up seeing. And so with those young men, when they first came to Ever Forward, it was a place of like, hey, let's just come to this space. We're going to talk about, you're going to teach me how to be a better teacher. And for me to be a better teacher, I got to know how to teach you better. So tell me about you. Ask me about me. Like, you can ask me, ask me some questions. And we began to build this community. And that community is, now 18 years later. And so our oldest students, they're in their 30s, right? It's been wild watching them. They're fathers, they're husbands, they're military folks, they're business owners, they're doing amazing things, and some have dealing with some struggles, right? I mean, there's some who also are struggling in some ways. And so how to know that what we created for them in high school, this space of like taking off that emotional mask, of being able to like talk about what's going on. So you're now bottling it up. Some people have learned and been trained to bottle it up, suck it up, mask it up. And then we wonder why young people are exploding emotionally, socially in our communities. Well, there's only so much you can handle. Like, I think if anybody who's like highly intellectual will be like, I may need to go do some work around this thing that I'm feeling that I'm not dealing with. I mean, if you're highly, maybe. And maybe people who are highly intellectual are also like, I'll get over it. Like, there's plenty of ways of handling how emotional overload happens. But our work is what's happening on the front of the mask. That's what this movement is about. If I talk about the Million Mask movement, you're going to be talking about masks a lot, because that's a big metaphor for our work, right? The mask is what I let people see about me on the outside. This is what I let people see. This is the mask I wear. And what's behind the mask are the things you don't let people see.
Mm.
Now, there are people who have actually said in workshops, oh, I let people see everything about me. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And in the beginning, I would want to challenge them. I remember the first person who said that to me was a teacher. Oh, I tell everyone everything about me. And I really wanted to just like probe like that question, right? Like, because I'm sure there's questions that would be asked that would create some trepidation of like, should I answer this question? But or imagine if, I'll ask you this, Karen, when people ask you how you're doing, let's say you're moving through the day, someone says, how you're doing, do you have a go-to answer? What's your go-to
Oh,
answer?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah. Okay. And some people, here's one right here. Some people say, I'm fine. Right? This was made by an eighth grader in one of our workshops. So it says, I'm fine. But if you look a little closer and I'm fine, it's hard to see. Let me see if you can get the right angle. It's a lot of light here. There's a whole lot of words inside I'm fine.
Mm.
See it? It's hard to see.
Yes, it's yes.
It's a collage of a bunch of words. And I think that what we say is, if you've ever said I'm doing great and you weren't doing great, have you ever said I'm great and you weren't great?
100%. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm conditioned to say I'm great and
Yeah.
keep it moving.
And keep it moving. And so the question would be, for us in our work, that's the mask.
Mm,
And we're not telling people they shouldn't have them. We're just saying, are you aware of them? Because if everywhere I go and everywhere I ask and I say I'm great, so therefore maybe the person who responds has to say, feels like they need to say great too. And so then we keep moving through our world thinking everybody's doing great because we've asked people the question of how you're doing. Most people are not really answering that question because they know the question doesn't really mean anything. The question is usually a greeting that we treat as an inquiry, and it's actually not that. And so imagine teachers come to class and they're standing in front of the door. Hello, good morning. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Well, most kids are going to get trained by the 20 kids in front of them that says everyone says fine. That's how you keep it moving. And maybe if you say I'm not fine, then you're going to get a whole bunch of attention. Maybe you want attention. Maybe you don't want attention. Like, what is that? So if I want to keep things moving, I just say what every other kid said. I'm fine. Good. Good morning. How are you? But how many times do we get a false sense of how our community is doing because we think we're asking people how they're doing? And they're all saying, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm cool, I'm all right.
mm,
And so our work is really understanding that that's what we call the mask. And how do we begin to recognize there's so much more to each of us? And that's the work we've been doing around the world. And so we have a big goal, right? We want to collect 1,000,000 masks, right? I mean, that's a beautiful number, but more than just the number million, it's people around the world who recognize they're not alone. I'm not alone. People, there's
mm.
more to me than people can see. There's more to people who I meet than I can see. And that's this movement that we've been growing. I'll show you a couple of them in a second, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't keep. I can talk forever, so I don't want to hold up. If there was any other thing you
I
wanted to like.
I love everything you're saying. Zoe says, "Yes, better than me. Who do they think they are?" That, like, if you decide, "Oh, I am gonna do this or that," then you attract a skepticism sometimes and not support.
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, you mean? Do you mean when you say skepticism? You mean like skepticism around if somebody's actually doing great and they're, and so it's better for me to say I'm doing great also. I,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
or if you decide, "I'm gonna do something different," um, "I'm gonna try to do something different,"
Mm.
then instead of being like, "Oh, that's awesome, go for it," people feel threatened sometimes by that decision.
Hmm. Yeah. And I wonder if I were to tell you that I wonder if they feel threatened or if they feel like have responsible to do something about it.
Mm,
Like if we're passing each other in the hall, like and we're walking. Hey, how you good morning? How you doing? And you just say fine, I'm doing great. And I'm like, oh, freaking, this is a horrible morning. That pressure for that other person. Now in my mind, I'm not. I normally won't do that because I have to know somebody really well to like shift the norm. So I would be like, "Oh, good. How are you? Oh, okay, fine. I'm doing all right. I'm busy. I'm whatever." I'll say something. But to know that if I really want to have a check in, if I really wanted somebody to check in, sometimes people are throwing clues out that they want somebody to check in with them, but the person doesn't even get it because the person's
mm,
halfway down the hall because they weren't really asking how you're doing. They were doing their morning greeting, and oftentimes, and maybe somebody's been annoyed before. Maybe somebody out there has been like, so you ask somebody how they're doing, and they're like, "Let me tell you," and they start going into a story. Well, you could get annoyed with them, but you asked, right? You get annoyed, right? You're like, "Wait, you're not supposed to be telling me a story. You're supposed to give me a one-word answer so we can keep it moving, right?" And oftentimes we forget that some people, when you ask them, they've been waiting for somebody to ask them all day. They've been waiting
mm,
for somebody to see them and willing to listen, and maybe you weren't really willing to listen, so you asked the question, but you didn't really want the answer,
mm. That's
and
so true,
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking about how so much of this is capitalism, right? And the
Mm,
way
mm,
we're taught, okay, you can only allocate this amount of time to get from class to class. And punctuality is imperative. And if you're not there on time, you are a failure. And this is going down in your permanent record. And then you're going to be marked truant. And, there'll be all this punishment associated with it. When we need time to build relationship, we need time to check in. And even like that jarring ring, bell ring thing, and all the bodies coming out and everybody's rushing around trying to get to the next. It's our schools are not designed to give people the time to have uh check-ins.
I mean, thank you for saying that, because I talk a lot about schools. So anyone who gets offended when people talk bad about schools, just get prepared. So just prepare to be offended, because it's going to happen. So I love schools. I love teachers. I was a former teacher. I was a teacher for 10 years, administrator for 3. Never wanted to be a teacher, so teaching called me, and now I work on the outside, working with schools in a different capacity. So if anyone's prepared to be offended, just get ready, because here's what I think about education. I love education. Education has saved my life. I think I value learning. I value what I've been able to do because I had an education. I value what I've been able to do because I helped other young people find a value in education. But schools are failing for lots of reasons, and I'll say one. And when I say one, there's many. Let me start with this one. Schools are probably the only industry that looks like they did 100 years ago. Right? The teacher in the front, students in rows, or maybe they're at fancy tables because they, have gotten a little bit advanced. And teacher spews information to you for a couple of weeks, and then on one special day, you're going to spew the information back to them, and you're graded based on how well you retain what they spewed to you, so you can spew it back to them the same way. And then it happens again. We're going to move to the next lesson, and we're going to spew and spew and spew and spew. And we keep, like, that is how schools looked 100 years ago. And so what's changed? Well, we can say lots of things have changed. Oh, we got this, and we have smart boards, and we have whiteboards, we have this, and we don't have chalk anymore. And we got, like, with all other things you can say aesthetically that have changed, but what has changed about how it works? Now, there are plenty of charter schools out there who have done things differently, right? People have their own debates about charter school. Get ready. I've worked there. I've experienced them. I've seen some that work well. I've seen some that don't. I've seen a lot of placating. I've seen a lot of babying and coddling. I've seen a lot of here's what I know that we have to be able to do in education. Education has to transform. We had a chance over this last 2 years, 3 years, you can say since 2020, to dramatically change how education looks. And you know what most people went back to? The way they were doing it before this madness. Now we just have arrows on the floors to tell kids which side of the hall to walk down. We have sanitizer in some of the buildings. We have, we have some paper products in the bathrooms now because we've done some things.
Ventilators.
Oh yeah, perhaps, right? Yes, ventilators, and sometimes it's not changing the educational outcomes. Sometimes it is, but I think that we have work to do, and I think that that's my work. And I've worked in public, private, and charter schools, so I've seen it. I've seen high performing schools. I've seen low performing schools. And I think that there's some work to be done in terms of that's my work on the outside now. It's like, how do we support educators? How do we support teachers? Teachers work really hard, and sometimes they're underappreciated. And as a former teacher, when I went from the public school system to a private school. Here's a couple of big things I noticed right away. Every first Tuesday or second Tuesday, there would be bagels and fruit for celebrating the birthdays of the month. That's something so small. That's something small. Like every school could do it, and most schools don't. They don't appreciate their teachers. They don't acknowledge, oh, they'll put their name on a calendar in the wall, and maybe that's simple enough. But guess what? I think that what I remember when I was leaving that school, I was like, oh, I'm gonna miss the bagel Tuesdays, right? Small stuff. So when I went back to a public school, I brought it with me. I brought the idea. I'm like, every first Tuesday, we're gonna celebrate the month birthdays for that month. And I think it's like small stuff can go a long way, but oftentimes we get stuck in the old systems. And so I think you know, this work is difficult and challenging, but my work is now, how do we help improve it, and how do we ultimately, you got to transform it. But guess what? Without the freedom to like make things look differently, there is no innovation. There's no room for innovation. And most people in most schools are just comfortable just keeping it the way it is because it's working the way it's designed to work.
Mm,
It's working the way it was designed to work. It wasn't designed to for the people to thrive and strive and become
no.
like, you go to these private schools, you'll see like you'll see why there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Spend one day at one, spend one day, and you'll be like, what the heck is happening here?
Yeah.
Right? And not that all private schools are good, but there's something happening in those buildings that is causing kids to either get super hungry. All kids don't thrive there, but I'm in the work of like, how do we, and our work that we get to do in those schools is really like, even if you're a good academically student, how are you navigating your emotional well-being, you know?
Mm. So if you could design a school, what would a typical day look like for a student? Let's say it's a high school.
Hmm. That's a great question. I ask my students this a lot because I think that's the vision that I have. Is like, what would it be like for students who are not doing good in school to do good in school, to like find design their own school. I mean, what would I want in the school? I mean, look, there's the requirements, and then there's the things that we can do that are not on the list of requirements. There's the I got to go through the A through G's. I got to get you ready for these things, but it would look so different in the sense of like, what are the things that you want to be learning, right? Like, what are the things that are exciting for you to learn? What are the things that you're passionate about? What are the things that, but I think that, how do you mix in the stuff that are also part of requirements? Maybe we just change some of the requirements, right? I mean, it's a whole new world, right? Like, it's a whole new world that we live in. In my pocket, I have more information than big libraries that have millions of books, right? I have it in my pocket. I can have this data. So how does it look different? How does it need to look different? And I think that we have to begin exploring that. I think that's part of
Yes.
the work. Yeah.
And how can we help young people discover themselves, learn what their strengths are, learn what their passions are,
Yeah.
give them different experiences so they get to test things out and see what they vibe with and what they don't like doing.
Yeah.
So that by the time they leave, they have a strong sense of self and a strong connection to the world because they've gone out and tried different things and they've built some relationships and some networks so that they have people to call who can help them uh on their way.
Yeah. And if they are clear about what things set them off to a place of feeling in flow, and what things pull them back to a place of, I want to resist. I want to resist. I'm going to show you this one mask, and this is one that I think would stand out in our work. So, when we talk about the front of the mask, these are the things that I gladly let people see. So,
Mm.
can you see it? Okay, I want to make sure you can
Yeah,
see it.
bring it. Okay. I'm all right. I
I
I'm figuring it out.
I got it.
I got it. That's what I allow people to
That's
see.
the front. Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then
this is the back.
inside
Here we go. That way.
he says, "I don't know. I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed." Oh my god. And I don't a survey just came out of California public school teachers, and those were the 4 words that they used to describe it, like, "I'm overwhelmed."
Mm.
It's just too much,
And this is
and
a 17-year-old too.
wow.
17-year-old, right?
Yeah.
17-year-old male. And this is what we see in these masks, right? When do people get a chance to really talk about what they are really experiencing, right? Now, if adults are experiencing the overwhelm and worry and whatever, I think sometimes they often think, and I've told kids this before as a teacher, you ain't got no job. Your only job is do your homework. What you talking about? But I
Mm.
had forgotten when I said those statements. I forgot that when I left school, when I was a teenager, I was taking care of my siblings. I was sometimes cooking and cleaning. I was taking care of the home. I was the oldest, but I was responsible for helping raise my siblings. What happens then? What happens then? What happens when you don't go home just to do homework and rest, and get ready for the next day? What if when your home is a second job? You go
Mm,
to school all day and then you go to your night job taking care of people, and then you get back to school the next day, and people act like you're like these other kids who had got to go home and take a good night's sleep and have a nice dinner
mm,
and relax and kick back. And what if your reality isn't the same? Because we would think that as adults, the kids don't have jobs, but if you didn't grow up having responsibilities, you wouldn't even expect it. And even
100%.
though I had experienced it, I told kids, you ain't got no job. Your only job is to do your homework.
Mm,
Until a kid reminded me, you don't know me. You don't know what I got to do when I get home. And then I started remembering, oh, that's right. My home was not like people were just waiting on me hand and foot to go and be ready for the next day. Like I was, if I had needed clothes clean for the next day, I better go clean them.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? Like I had responsibilities, and I think imagine that. Imagine how many. There's this video by this one organization. I forgot the name, but it's called "I Wish You Knew." And these
mm,
students, these little, it's like a 2 minute long video. It's like, I wish you knew that last night I didn't have any food, right?
mm.
I wish you knew that. And whatever the situation is, everyone has a different life. So it's not to say that that's for everybody, but I wish you knew that I'm carrying a lot of emotional weight that I can't talk about. I wish you, but on the outside, I got a good smile and I got a good laugh and I'm like funny and I'm silly and I got friends and I put on that show every day.
Yes, and how young people, their peers, acceptance of them and, like, wanting to appear like everything's fine for their peers
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
and not wanting to admit that there's anything that's troubling them or anything that makes them different from their peers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. And that's part of the work. And that's what this movement is about. And so, what we want people to do is not only they can make their own mask, and these are all anonymous, right? So they can actually go online and make a mask, right? They can. Do you want me to share the link here, or you have a place
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So it's
Tell me
million.
the link and I'll post it in a comment.
Yeah, it's a millionmask.org. Millionmask singular.org. So on there, people can make a mask, and they can. We have a big launch here in the Bay Area on 11/11, right after the election season, right? Right, like the week of the election, right? 11/11/22. We got a big day. It's Veterans Day, and it's a launch of this movement, and it's a way for us to share with the community what we've been up to, but also it's going to be an interactive art experience. And so, if folks who are local, come on out, and I think what we're trying to do with this work is really work with more schools, more companies. There's plenty of companies out there who are talking about DEI stuff, but yet do no DEI stuff. A lot of companies who I've been talked to about DEI stuff, everything DEI is all voluntary, right?
Mm,
So it's like, oh, we're gonna put on this thing, but we can't make people come. Oh,
right.
we're gonna
So
put on this thing.
therefore, the only people who do come are the ones who are already bought in and believe that DEI is important, whereas the people who really need to be there are not there.
Or you get bribed with enough food that you're like, that sounds like something delicious. I'm gonna show up to, right? we're gonna we're gonna go and do this thing. We're gonna go paint. We're gonna go. Let's do some fun stuff, right? And I'm gonna like just I'm gonna just deal with it for that day. Now I'm not saying that's happening everywhere, but I've experienced it. And anyone who's running a DEI in a company who puts a person in that position but doesn't put them in a position to actually make moves knows it, right? I think that's what we see. And I think the mask you saw of the 17-year-old is just an example, but people all over the world are making masks. Um, and
Yes, we have a comment to that effect. Pierre says, I try to respect the mask online. Sometimes entrepreneurs do not have time to poke at that image when a poke is needed, especially for young people.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
How
So they're
many of us adults are using social media to project this image of ourselves? Oh, my life is awesome. I go on these lovely vacations. My children are thriving. Everything is perfect. That's our mask is the way we curate our public image.
and kids too, and it's it's a highlight reel. I think if we don't get
Mm,
clear about what it is, and that's what I tell students, I said, look, what you're seeing online, I love. I'm not here to talk bad. I love my phone, but I also know it's a highlight reel. If I'm not
yes.
careful, I'll be comparing my behind the scenes life late at night, looking at people's amazing life, and I'm like, all I can compare it with is how things are not going the way I want it to go in my own life, and therefore I'm comparing behind the scenes story to the highlight reel, and those are often disconnected, right? And I think
Yes.
that part of it is, how do we begin to find the people that we can connect with deeper, that we can talk about what's happening behind the scenes, right?
And
And I
we know
think,
that the algorithm is designed to make us feel that way, to make us feel bad about ourselves.
mm, here's what also algorithm does, and my algorithm is trained by me because I watch a lot of stuff happening in schools, definitely a lot of tragic stuff happening in schools,
Mm,
and I sometimes have to ask myself, is it happening more and more, or is it that I have access to every city and every state and
mm,
every tragedy around the country, around the world, and I'm just seeing more of it? Has the world always been this difficult to hear about? But because I've not had to hear about it, I mean, imagine at the hands of our kids, we have put material, we put equipment, we put a device that is lets them have access to information overload, right?
mm,
And how do you handle, if your algorithm is focused on negative stuff, then every time you open it, it's going to be something else negative, every something else tragic, something else difficult, something else. And I realize that I've trained mine really well, so every time I open it is another school situation, is another
mm,
tragic thing, and I'm like, okay, I need to stop looking at this for a while. I need to do some more positive searches on here. I need to get some mixture of some motivation and some inspiration, because it can often feel un unsustainable to keep it up. And so you see a thing, you're like, I don't think I'm watching that. I'm not ready for that. My system can't handle another school shooting. And we had one in Oakland
mm,
like last week. I mean, and we had one at a middle school a couple of weeks before that.
mm,
And my work is now really like, how do we support these students? Like 2 days after the students have experienced it, just because the counselors have left doesn't mean the kid is or
mm,
have all dealt with what they needed to deal with, right? But what happens every time. Counselors will be on site to help students who, like, sometimes it's a week, 2 weeks, it's a month later when the stuff starts boiling out, when the stuff starts erupting through your system and your soul and your heart. So what happens then? Where are the counselors then?
mm,
Are they still available to you? And sometimes we find that there's a whole lot of paperwork ahead of talking to somebody about something, because we don't provide those kind of resources readily available to our students, right?
mm,
And I think that's part of the work that we have to begin transforming in our schools too. Like, if we need to make it available, we need to make it compulsory that any student who needs to talk to somebody has somebody to talk to, and it shouldn't be if after they fill out this form and get their parents to fill out this special paperwork to see if they qualify for, oh, we don't know if you're going to talk to that counselor or that counselor. Like, sometimes it's such oh man, about to get me to this rabbit hole here. Sometimes it's such the level of paperwork that's required for a kid to go talk to someone seems daunting for me as an adult.
mm.
And you're like,
100%.
and so
And they may
now,
not have access to this information, right? Some
oh well,
families don't wanna talk about, what the family's income is, or even what their address is, or what their social security number, whatever it is. And then
whatever it is.
create all these barriers
Yeah,
instead of that any young person who says, "Hey, I need help," we gotta listen to that.
that's right. That's right. That's part of it. It's part of our work.
Yeah.
It's part of our work. And
So
that's
just if you like if you could redesign the school day, what are some activities that young people would be engaged in?
well, I mean, I think that first, like, there's social emotional supports readily available, right? Not just not just not just a thing they do, but it's more of a being, right?
Mm,
I mean, I think there's awareness, there's then observation, and then there's action, right? There's the I mean, I think, it's a beautiful question, and it also sometimes it feels like I don't even know where to start. Like,
mm,
do we start with the food? Do we start with the the aesthetics? Do we start with how
Yes.
do we re-beautify? How do students walk in the building and feel welcome and feel warm,
Right.
right?
How
How
do
do
we
we
redesign the bathrooms?
how do we don't start there. That's just yes. The-
You
Water
know,
fountains.
there
How
are
about water fountains? How about
designers
water
who have
fountains?
studied.
Huh?
Pardon?
How about water fountains?
Yes, water fountains.
I mean, there's so many things. Oh, I don't know. Say, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. You said something about these bathrooms. I've
There's
experienced.
designers who have studied, the bathroom is the locus of so much bullying and
Mm,
harmful behavior. And there's a way to make a public school bathroom that is not conducive to bullying, that really sets, like, the design of the bathroom itself can create a much better social interaction.
mm. That's not my expertise, so I don't want to jump into the architecture design, but I believe that there's many things we can do. I think there's a lot of as a principal, as a teacher, as an administrator, I've seen ridiculousness taking place in lots of places, right? But but behind those doors, which are supposed to be these private places for you to go and handle your personal needs, like what about the stuff that's happening in public sight in
Mm,
classrooms around the Bay Area, around the country, right? This idea that this room you walk in is supposed to be a place of safe and healing and love and care, and oftentimes that feeling is hard to come by.
mm,
So I think there's so many places to start, but I think that one thing I would think about, like for schools, the students who I get excited about are the students who are really don't like school. Look, if a kid likes school, they're gonna do whatever you ask them to do for the
mm,
most part. They're gonna, even if it seems ridiculous, they're gonna do it and they're gonna follow along. And the kids who don't like school, the reason they pick on kids who like school is because they can't imagine that you would really want to do what this silly teacher is asking you to do. Like if I don't like school and I don't like nothing about school, it's easy for me to pick on people who are excited, right? Because that's just what our attention will go to those people. They will annoy us, maybe. They'll irritate us, right? Like, how is this kid smiling at this stupid assignment? Like, and maybe I'm confused. I don't want to get the assignment. Maybe I just don't want. I don't like it. Whatever it may be. And I've
mm,
seen it. I've seen it. I've been on both sides. I've been bullied in middle school. I know what that's like. I know that feeling. And so one of the things I experience is, what about for the kids who don't like school? Like, wow, how would they design school?
mm,
What would school look like for them? Because I
mm.
think those are the kids who need to be helping redesign schools.
I love it.
And I think that's where my energy is always trying to go. Like, what do you want to happen? Like, what if school was different? What if it was flipped around? What if you went to, for kids who like need to work and who need to help support their family? Maybe they work in the day and then they go to school in the night,
Mm,
right? Like, I mean, if you were going to adult school and you wanted to get your diploma, GED, whatever, you got to still work in the day. So they're going to have you at night school. So why don't we flip it for those who are already on that trajectory? Hey, okay,
uh,
you want to work? Okay, here's how it works. You work in the morning, you come to school in the evening. You don't come to school, you don't get to go to work.
mm,
Like this is how it works. This is an agreement we're gonna make here. It's gonna look a little different. You go to work in the morning for 5 hours, you come to school for this many hours, and you get the work done. You don't come to work, you don't miss school, you don't miss work, right?
yes, and
Otherwise,
we give you enough time so that you can get enough sleep so that you can do this sustainably.
that's right. That's right. And we make it look different like that for those students. I was working on a project to really like rethink that the kids that are dropping out of school. Why are they dropping out? Many of them, they want to go work. They want to make money. They don't like school. School doesn't work for them. And yet we continue to push it down their throat to be like, no, you got to want it. You got to like it. You got to do it. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep failing you. And why would I show up to a place that I'm failing at, keep failing at? Don't want to be, they don't like me here, I don't like them, and therefore why would I keep showing up? Well, some people do it, but most people are like, yeah, I'm out. I'm a self-eject. I'm a
Yes.
self-eject. I'm just not going to show up anymore. What if you show up? What if you miss? Look, I've been a teacher. There's been kids who, when they didn't show up to school, I, I didn't want to call nobody. I didn't want to call nobody. I'm like, that kid is driving me nuts, right? That kid's driving me nuts. But some kids they miss 12 minutes of class. I'm like, is everything okay? But
Mm,
that's human connection. And if you have a connection with somebody, you want to push them and you want to move them forward. And if you don't have a connection with somebody, it's easy to like just be like out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
And that's human. And I think that I had to learn that as an educator. Like, why am I having this kind of issue with this kid? Why am I having a relationship that's not as positive with this kid? And I always wanted to improve them. But guess, and I've had to do some work on that too. But I've been in the classroom for since 2015, like 8 years now. And I think I look back, I miss it sometimes.
Mm.
But it's hard work. It's
It is
hard work.
hard work,
It's hard work.
hard physical work.
And I think that people who don't know what teaching is like, there's so many people making decisions about schools who have never taught in schools, and they
Mm.
think just because they've studied about schools that they know enough. And I think that that should not be allowed. That should not be allowed. You should not be allowed to make decisions about schools. I mean, you can be an architect, you can design something, but if you ain't walked in a school and sat in the room and sat in these uncomfortable chairs that you're supposed to sit in for 7 hours a day, you
Mm.
sit in that chair for 7 hours a day, and you tell me don't sit in your plush, fancy, rolling, strolling chair, and then you say, I'm gonna design some hard back, uncomfortable chairs for a bunch of kids, and you
Mm.
think you've done something because you went to school to study about whatever study of interior design you studied. How about you trade your chair for that chair for a day, and let's see what you say next, right?
Mm.
I mean, this is the thing we got. This is simple stuff, right? But it's also, it seems like it should not be this complex, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and now that we have kids who have over this last couple of years, I know we got to get ready to go, so I just want to stop here. But I can talk. I mean, here's what I want to say: the work that we need the community to do. If you are passionate about schools, education, people connecting, well-being, it can't be the job of others. It can't be like, I want my community to be safer and I don't need to be a part. They need to
Mm.
fix it. I want my schools to be better in my community, but they need to fix it. Like,
Mm.
it needs to be we, we, like, we
Right.
need to come together and say, how can I be a part? If that's, hey,
Mm.
I'm going to make a contribution. If I'm going to come and offer to volunteer, if that means I'm going to have my company shift some resources to that school, to that community. Like it can't keep being that everyone else has to be able to fix the stuff.
Mm.
Now there are the people. Look, there are people who are claiming they're fixing stuff and not doing nothing. There's plenty of
Mm.
people in these offices, in these positions, sitting on these panels and sitting on these meetings who don't do nothing but
Mm.
go to meetings. And I don't really have a whole lot of patience for a whole lot of meetings, but
Mm.
I'm clear about the work that I'm called to do in this. And when we get young people to design things like this, to say I'm fine and recognize that they get it and they help their peers get it too, that there's more going on than you can see. I said
Mm.
I'm fine, but yeah, there's more. And to be able to know that we can find ways of helping them support each other, and that's what we're building with all of the tools we're trying to build, is to keep training and educators. And so, I invite people, if you find it difficult to think about those, the tool you create, the mask, is anonymous. But I encourage you to ask yourself, if you are afraid, if you are nervous, if you have fear, then guess what? Every young person you meet is probably experiencing the same thing.
Mm.
And so we ultimately are creating spaces. Right? That's what our work is, to create spaces to build healthy relationships. And I invite people who are paying attention to this, listening to this, who will eventually see this, to say, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. I'm not going to get stuck behind the way it's been done always. Like,
Mm.
we're going to shift it new. And I think that anyone who is ready to do that, come on, join the movement with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ashanti, thank you so much for your powerful, powerful work. And I just want to shout out all the young people who have allowed me to be their mentor. And those relationships changed my life. Like, that I
Mm,
would not be here having this conversation with you if I always say my mentees are my best mentors, because
mm,
they transform me. And I just want more people to have this opportunity to really get to know young people, and to really get to know young people across difference. It's one thing to know your own kids and you spend plenty of time around your own kids,
Yeah.
often,
Yeah. Yeah.
but trying to really understand what is it like to be a kid, who's an immigrant, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then how, as you said so powerfully, that this is not something that we point the finger and say, "Oh, those folks over there need to take care of this."
Yeah.
Every single person in our community has a stake in the success of our young people,
That's
not
right.
only,
Hmm.
our own children, but in the entire community
That's
of
right.
young people. And we all can do something to set young people up for success, or we can all do something to cause them further challenge. And I just urge, we're in the middle of this youth mental health crisis,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we all need to step up, and it is going to be healing for everyone when we come together and really listen to each other and really learn how to take our masks off.
Emotional mask, and I think that's the key. I think that's the key, and that of us all being a part of the transformation of our schools and our communities. Like we get to be a part of that.
Yes.
Yes, we get to
Yes.
be a part of that. So
So millionmask.org.
millionmask.org is the site where people can make their mask. If they want to, we have an event coming up 11/11/22. I'll share that link with you as well, and that's the link that they can go. I'll put that in the chat for you there.
Excellent.
And that's where people can get a ticket to come, and it's free. But if they want to support this movement, if they once they learn about the Million Mask movement, they want to support it, they can support it. There's plenty of people out here who have resources that they could support, but they may not. I don't want anybody to leave their career. Like I left my engineering career to become a teacher, but that called me. I'm not asking
Mhm.
anybody else to do it. I'm asking people, follow your heart. What can you give? Can you give time? Can you give talent? Can you give treasure? Like what can you give to support a transformation of learning? That is
Can
an
you give a
opportunity.
summer job to a young
Can you
person?
give a job?
And
Can you give a company resources so that they can hire a kid? Right?
yes.
You may not have the capacity to manage, and if you've never managed teenagers, don't start with trying
Right.
to hire one. Like, let me just let me prepare you for some. You want to see somebody test your ability for sanity? Let a teenager convince you to hire them. Let me just I'll stop right there. I love teenagers. Uh, but I tell you, it's not for the weak at heart at all. And it's not for the and look, there let me we could go on forever. I want to say, please think about how you can support those who are already doing the work.
Yes.
How can you support and not reinvent the wheel? Not like I'm gonna create my own little intern program. Great. If you want to do that, do that. But there's so many people who are trying to like keep things moving, and you could actually your support, your time, energy, talent, and if you have money, your resources could help other organizations continue to do their mission. And so find what you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about the work we're doing, there's a lot of organizations around the country, around the world, who are doing things to try and help life be better for others. And that's the sacrifice that I'm here to make. And I'm excited because I get to it fills my soul to be able to do it, even though sometimes it's really hard.
Ashanti, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I put the link in the chat. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I put it, I think I chatted it back to you. Um, I am so eternally grateful. What is the name of the movie where people can watch you?
Oh yeah, that's called The Mask You Live In. The
Yes.
Mask You Live In. Yeah. I'll share the trailer with you there as well. The
And
Mask You Live In.
we didn't even get a chance to we didn't get a chance to talk about gender specific stuff, which I
Oh
also
man. Well, if anybody goes out there, they can watch my TED talk talking about masks. You can talk about that. I mean, look, I this is the work I'm doing all the time. So if you want to bring us into your company, you want to do a talk, just go up, go search, go to Instagram, follow. You can follow Branch Speaks, and you can follow Ever Forward Club. That is those are that's the organization, and then that's my channel. And you can see the work that we're doing, and if that serves, I mean, I've done lots of talks out there, but a goal right now is really building this movement. So we need your help. And
Yes.
not only do young men have a need around this work around emotional well-being, all of our students do, but oftentimes um, the ones who are exploding, our jails are 94, 95% men,
Mm,
and the percentage keeps going up. I don't think men are just that bad of people, but when you've been told that you can only be part of your humanness, strong, tough, handsome, athletic, cool, and you can't show any of the other emotions, we're going to keep having them implode. They're walking around like
mm.
landmines, and we wonder why we see them continue on the news doing absolutely ridiculous behaviors. There's stuff going on inside that they're not able to navigate. And so anyway, that's you'll hear me talk about that on all places. But you can see our podcast. We have a podcast called "Taking Off the Mask," and that podcast is about for men from all ages around the world talking about these masks we feel forced to wear. And I hope people will take a listen to that, and hopefully that will inspire them to invite the men in their life to have more room to talk and speak and feel
Yes.
everything that we feel, not just the feelings that are comfortable for us to watch them feel. And
Yes.
sometimes it's not sometimes you're not really ready. So maybe we're not ready to tell you because we know that you can't handle all that we're carrying. So
Mm,
sometimes men need to have their own space, you know. I mean, that's
yeah.
what the Ever Forward Club was creating for those young men. That's what I'm on a men's team. So anyway, as you can tell, we could keep going all over and over. Maybe in a couple of weeks we'll do part two.
Part 2, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Ashanti.
Thanks for
I'm
having me.
so grateful. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Zoe,
Thank you,
appreciate
Zoe.
you. The Mask You Live In. Yes, great, great movie. Okay, I will see you next week on Collect Our Cousins. Thank you, Ashanti.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Cheers.